Welcome to What Healthy Couples Know That You Don't, a podcast dedicated to helping you create the relationship you truly want.
Empowering partners to influence change in addiction denial. Addictions offer all of us the possibility of comfort. Let's have one more drink in order to float away from the pain of living. The number of gambling ads about how easy it is to gamble from your phone without leaving the house gives you that feeling of action that is so thrilling. The pleasure of porn or shopping so much that you hide the bags from your partner. Keeping secrets means there's a problem. It does fill the emptiness inside. Addictions are insidious, sneaky, and available to all of us. It's my belief that the first step in facing the addiction and understanding how it works for you. It's my belief that the first step is facing the addiction and understanding how it works for you. What does it do for you? What is the purpose? Whatever weird comforts are offered by addictions, there is a reason for them that must be examined and understood in order to change. This requires a level of honesty that takes a tremendous amount of work and effort. It is not for the faint of heart. We hide our addictions from ourselves and others in order to keep them brewing. We have every reason, every excuse to not want to face the hard truth of how our addictions affect us and the people we love. The book I recommend the most to people so that they can begin to understand how we lie to ourselves is Dr. Abraham Tversky's book, Addictive Thinking: Understanding Self-Deception. Recovery can be very difficult because of shame. Shame is an obstacle to healing for everybody. How do you face hard truths about your own dark side without drowning in the shame? Learning how to balance the stranglehold of shame that stomps on the soul feels impossible, and it's not. In my previous episode, 61, Dr. Robert Navarra shed light on dispelling the myth that recovery should not really include partners. It is also my belief that partners do need to be involved in recovery so that they can learn how to not contribute or add to the shame, which can end up being a roadblock instead of a support on this very difficult path. So the work of recovery is complicated, and it begins with being honest with yourself, honest with your therapist or group members, and honest with your partner. Today's guest is Amber Hollingsworth, with over 2 decades working in addiction recovery and family dynamics, and a community of more than 700,000 on YouTube. Amber offers partners empowering real-world strategies that restore hope and agency. Her YouTube channel is Put the Shovel Down, and she offers free resources on her website, familyrecoveryacademy.online. Thanks so much for being here today, Amber.
Thanks for having me, Rhoda. I am super excited about our conversation today.
All right. Let's begin with, how does addiction impact the dynamics of a healthy relationship? And what are some early warning signs that couples should look out for? Then part 2, help us understand the power of denial.
Absolutely. That's a lot of questions. Let's break them down. So the first one is, about how it impacts a relationship is, over time, it puts the couple in what I call like a cat and mouse kind of game. And so it eventually results in one person thinking the other person is engaging in some sort of addictive behavior, that's drinking, drugs, or other, too much. And so the response to that, usually from the person who may or may not be having an addiction, is usually to at first just sort of deny it or minimize it, and then to start to avoid their partner because their partner, they see them as on their case all the time. And so and then eventually you get this like one running from one and one chasing the other. And you get this cat and mouse dynamic, which eventually turns from that into almost like this parentified dynamic. The one that doesn't have the problem, it takes this role over, like they're trying to like find out what the other one's doing and make sure they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. And then you get this parentified type dynamic, and resentment starts to brew on both sides.
Absolutely, no question. I did addictions work before I went in private practice in Bridgeville. And I think it's so interesting how that caretaking, codependency, because you're out of control, I'm going to be in control, and people not recognizing that dynamic as being they're participating in. It's not just pointing your finger at the person who's struggling.
Absolutely. I mean, it's so predictable that couples end up in this very sort of like staged process that you can almost diagnose addiction just by looking at the dynamics in the couple. Like, because it's like it's almost always first this, then this, then this. Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to add about denial?
Is the denial part of it, because that was the second part of the question, right? The denial part. It's just that to understand denial, you have to understand that it is really a protective mechanism. And it's not just they're denying it to you, but they're denying it to themselves. Yes. And you can't just directly go at denial, or it actually gets worse. And I can go into that as much or as little as you want me to, but the more directly you try to confront denial, the worse the denial gets. It's almost like this wall they're building to protect themselves. So if you go out directly, they just put more stones onto the wall, making it harder and harder and harder to reach the person.
I think I agree with you completely. It is about, I think everything we do is about protecting and defending, and it's that switch into recognizing with some self-awareness that it's not good for your life or your partner's life or your kids or anybody in that circle, and deciding you want to do something about it.
Right. And it's like, not only does it make their denial worse as far as they're, minimizing the problem, but it makes you, the partner, become the villain in the story, in their mind.
Right.
And that causes a whole trickle-down effect of problems that actually just keep the addiction going and going.
Yeah, there is. That is absolutely true. So a family member is ready to have a conversation with someone they love about their addictions. What advice do you have to help shift the conversations that end up in denial to connection instead of defensiveness?
My first thought when you said that, Rhoda, was to say, don't try to directly have a conversation with them about that was my first thought. It was sort of like first thought, second thought. More, you wait for the right opportunity where it naturally comes into play. Like if one person drinks too much and then the next day they're saying, I'm feeling crummy, you can just, then you can sort of jump in on that conversation where they're at. So that was my first thought. My second thought was, if you are going to bring it up, then bring it up about something that's maybe related to the addiction, but not directly the addiction. So don't bring up your drinking, your smoking, your using, whatever it is. You can bring up something that you notice that's going on with them. Hey, I noticed that you're not around as much. I noticed that you're disconnected, or you seem sad. And so talk about those things that the person probably can see or acknowledge without directly pointing the finger onto the addiction. I like to say it's like you can sort of put some dots on the board, but let them connect the dots to the problem. If you don't directly try to connect the dot for them, it's tempting. You want to, but it doesn't work.
I had a mentor many years ago who I revered, and she said, the defensiveness is a wall, and you want to wiggle up to it. You don't want to bash into it. You
wiggle
want to wiggle
up to it. I
up
love
to
that.
it. And that's what
exactly
you're talking about. Yeah. What are the clues that someone may actually be ready to stop drinking or using or shopping or gambling? I really think there's so many ways that we can comfort ourselves with
Right?
addictions.
We all have a little something, right?
Yep.
What you're going to see before a person actually even says it to you, because they're not even going to say to you, I need to stop this until like way, way far in, because they're not sure if they want to stop or they're not sure they can stop. And they're not going to say it to you or anybody else because they don't want to be held accountable for that. So they'll start sort of like secretly trying to cut back is what you're now. It usually doesn't work if it's an addiction, but those are actually good signs. Another thing that you might see is them, and they may say this to you, although they won't say it's because I'm addicted, but they may say, well, I'm going to do dry January, or I'm going to not do this for 30 days or 2 weeks or whatever. And that's a sign that something's going on with them. Now, it's not necessarily a sign that they think they're addicted. What happens there is they're usually trying to prove to themselves that they're not addicted when they do that.
I would agree with that. That's right. Yep.
Yeah. But it's still a sign that they're questioning something, right? It's a sign that we're moving into figuring it out.
I can't tell you how many people would say to me, well, I know I'm not addicted because I quit drinking in January, you know? Yeah. Yep. I could stop. It wasn't a big deal. Yeah. Yeah. That's really true. What's the biggest misconception people have about functional alcoholics and their relationships?
Well, the biggest misconception about functional alcoholics is that it's somehow not really alcoholism. Like some people even say, oh, I'm a functional alcoholic. And it's kind of a way of saying, yeah, maybe I drink too much, but it's not really alcoholism. But actually it is alcoholism. It's just an earlier stage. And most people don't recognize addiction until they get to a point of dependency, as in like I need to do it all the time or else I get sick. But you're actually addicted long before you're dependent, because you have to do something long enough, consistently enough, frequently enough to get dependent, which means the addiction is there long before you're like drinking in the morning or whatever. So when a lot of people are thinking about it, they think it means, well, they're not real alcoholic. They just, they drink too much sometimes. But I see it as, yes, this is alcoholism. You're just in an earlier stage, like stage 3 instead of stage 4.
And that's not something I've heard anybody say before. And I think you're right about that. There is like this pride about functioning, My bills are paid. I didn't, I haven't drunk so much. I lost my job.
Right.
And
the job with alcohol is the last thing to go. I see a lot of very functional alcoholics, like doctors, lawyers, super successful businessmen, Ironmen. I mean, they do all kinds of things, but trust me, they have the problem. Yeah.
Isn't it lawyers that have the highest drinking rate?
I'm not sure what the statistic is, but I know it's high. In fact, I was sort of surprised to learn that in South Carolina, where I am, you know how like when you have a license, you have to like take credits and renew your license and everything.
Yeah.
Well, in South Carolina, as a lawyer, you have to take educational credits every renewal period about addiction. That's how. I mean, that tells you something, right? Like,
yeah, I've never heard that before. Wow, I have to take them in sexual abuse. That that you had to be a mandated reporter. So those are the ones you have to take. But that is fascinating. Oh my goodness, that's amazing.
Trying to like get lawyers to sort of see the issue or whatever. I just thought, I was surprised by that too.
Oh my. Besides adding to shame, which is one of the things that I think of as the most common mistake a partner can make when trying to help their addicted loved one. And I'm not saying it's even intentional. It's just can be that constant poking that just makes people hide. And I see shame as a big roadblock to deciding to do something different. What do you think about shame, and what do you think are other common mistakes partners make?
Well, it's interesting with the shame because they feel criticized by their partner, which hits a shame button, but that shame converts into something else so quick they don't even know that they feel shameful about it. It converts into resentment and self-pity, which fuels addiction. And so it's like, I'm mad at you. And so it's really a distraction. So I don't even know that they would recognize that they feel shameful about it in that moment, because they just recognize that you're being controlling or you're being mean or you're being critical. Almost immediately it happens that fast. And then they feel sorry for themselves about it. And so then that sort of makes them think, well, I just need to hide it from you because you're being ridiculous, which then fuels the addiction even more. I mean, it just is like, it's like dominoes start falling everywhere now.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
So what are some things that will help them with wiggling up besides what we already talked about? Because I really am thinking that people are listening in the audience and they aren't. I heard what you said in the earlier question, but is there anything else that can help that process of, I really need you to look at this?
Yes. We do a thing about once a month called the Motivational Unlock Challenge, which is specifically for people who have functional alcoholic addict partners. And one of the things I teach them is sort of the opposite. What your instinct might tell you to do is to try to get someone to see how they're harming themselves, how they're harming the family, how this is not good for the kids. Instead of trying to get someone to see how they're being bad, try to get someone to reconnect to their core values. So instead of saying like your drinking is having a negative impact on the kids or something, I might say something like, if parenting is a really strong value of this person, I always appreciated how engaged and involved in the kids' lives that you've been. Because in their heart, they see themselves that way. And probably their real self is that way. And now you're reminding them of that. Or like, I always appreciated how strong you were in integrity. And so what you're doing is you're reminding them of these things. And like I said, you don't connect the dot. You just put a dot on the board. They will connect the dot. They may not say it to you out loud, but they definitely do in their own mind. And they're like, yeah, I do care about that. Yes, that is important to me. And it makes them want to be more connected to that value, as opposed to when you come at them to show them how they're not being congruent with their values, then they just get defensive, and then that leads to the resentment, self-pity domino effect.
Yeah, that's true. It's such an important thing trying to communicate well in such a difficult situation. And I don't think I've ever had anybody be as clear about how you want to do the wiggling up and how you can think about that. And I personally think values are incredibly important and often bring those up in therapy, trying to get people to examine what is important to them. You know, I'll even say, look, I'm a very practical person, and that may not be something you value, which is okay. You can tell me to back up, because that practicality is just part of who I am. So I'm kind of modeling that I'm not attached to my value because I'm there for them, but I own it. And I think that process of thinking about values is so important. Do you agree?
Absolutely. It's like, what does this person value? I also look at, what are they good at? Like, what are they built for?
Yes.
You know, like, and because they usually care about whatever that thing is. And then the other question I ask myself is, how do they want to be seen by other people? And these are leverage points that you can push these buttons or play these cards in the right order at the right moment that really make a person want to back up to that plate.
When you say that, somebody popped into my mind, and I knew that he was drinking too much, or my gut was more about that. But I still remember asking him to write his eulogy for the future. And it was such a shift about thinking about what was important and what mattered to him. And he started paying more attention to his kids and all these other things that really mattered. But it was such an interesting transition because we'd been at this for a while. But that was the piece that kind of helped him think about, because he was older, you know, yeah, this is going to happen. How do I want people to see me and know me?
Legacy, right?
Yes.
Legacy is huge. that's a very, very strong motivator for people to change. Like, is this really how I want to be remembered? It's giant, right? It's knowing how, and when this is your partner, the good news is you know exactly what the buttons are, right? You know exactly what levers there are. You just haven't thought about playing the cards in that way, probably, because you're frustrated. Valid, which is valid, totally.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There was a great play in England, and it showed somebody in group reading the letter to their parents, and everybody was clapping and giving her lots of advice. And then it showed the next scene where she goes in and she reads it to her parents, and they both look at her and they say, look, you're going to be able to live here, but we've heard this over and over and over again, and we just can't believe it at this moment. And we just need you to understand that. We're going to give you a place to live, and we care about you, but we can't buy in yet. And it was such a more honest look at addictions and the exhaustion of the other people. But again, I think everything begins with that level of honesty. We're still here for you. We're still going to give you a place to live, but we're exhausted, And then for her to say, I can understand that. I get it because I've stolen from you 4 times and whatever. And when you keep that rhythm of honest feedback going back and forth, I think it changes everything. Do you agree about that?
Sometimes.
Okay, go ahead.
Like the story
Fix
you're telling, I assume that the story you're telling is somebody that's in treatment. So
Yes.
somebody that's in treatment is in a more of an active stage of change, and
That's right.
they have more of an awareness. So when you're dealing with someone at that level, I think you can absolutely be honest with them like that, especially if you do it in the right tone, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, if you deliver it right. If you're dealing with someone in denial who's not in treatment and not in an active stage of change, I don't think that level of honesty would be helpful. I think it would backfire on you.
Okay.
And you might be dealing with someone who says something to you like that, who's not been in treatment. They might be like, well, I'm not going to do that anymore. I won't let that happen. Or, from now on, this or that or the other. And I would actually, this might seem a little sneaky, but I always say, I'm not about what's fair. I'm about what works. So what I might say is, and this is what I say to clients, that might tell me something I know they've said. I might say something like, you know what? I kind of believe you. I feel like this time's different. Here's why this time's different. And then I show them some things about themselves and then they're like, you're right. It is different because I know this time's different because this and this and this happened, and I can see that you feel this way. And then I start bringing some things to the surface of their mind to prove to them that this time is different, instead of saying, how's this time different? Or instead of saying, I don't believe this time's different, I'll say, this time is definitely different, and here's why I know it's different. And then they'll believe you.
And when I think about all the times I've worked with a partner to examine how things are different this time, but I don't think I've thought about it the way you just said. And it's a little bit sneaky, but it's with their best interests at heart. And
Right.
So that's what makes that different. That's really interesting. I'm glad we're talking about it.
Yeah.
You talk a lot about breaking the cycle of enabling. What does that look like in a practical sense for couples?
I love this question because my take on this is very different from most addiction counselors. When we hear that word, most of us think about like letting someone live under your roof that has an addiction, or giving them money, like paying their bills or taking care of their kids, and they're not, which are enabling things for sure. Okay. But the big enabling thing, people have no idea that they're doing. And this is the one that matters. The big one is playing the villain. And let me explain to you why. If you have an addict in your life and you give them $20, sure, it is true that they probably will take that $20 and go use or whatever. And then you might say to yourself, oh, if I gave them the money and then they use and something bad happened, I'd say something. Well, that's ridiculous. If they do that and something bad happens, it's because of their addiction, not because of you. But anyways, if you give them $20, they might go out and buy something they might use today, and then it's over. Sure, that's enabling. But if you act a crazy fool and you yell and scream and criticize and play the villain, You just gave them emotional currency that they will use to continue to make bad decisions for the next 20 years. Over and over. And you know this if you've had this problem, because they just remind me of that time you did this. And then they work themselves up and they're justifying their use and they throw that at you. So it's like, I'm not saying you should just give them whatever money or whatever. I'm just saying it's not, $20 isn't going to make or break an addiction. But when you keep giving them the out, they'll just use it over and over and over and over again forever. Yeah.
So I'm thinking about victim, rescuer, persecutor, which is from transactional analysis in the 70s. And I'm thinking you're talking about villain being the persecutor, victim being woe is me, or rescuing. So how do you navigate enabling between not rescuing and not being the villain or perpetrator? What is that messy middle ground that stops you from enabling, but also doesn't put you in that villain role?
When you're trying to figure out how what you're doing is going to impact this other person, like, am I helping them use or not use? That gets really complicated and murky. Look, I would say there's an easier way to tell. The easier way to tell is how it makes you feel. When you're helping someone in any kind of situation, you always feel good about it. Think about it. When you're helping, it makes you feel good. You get all those good brain chemicals. You walk away feeling good.
And
when
it's
you're
clean.
enabling someone, you walk away feeling resentful.
Yeah.
Because it's like helping that you felt forced to do, and you didn't really want to do it. And so when you're helping someone, but you have a bad feeling about it, that's a good indicator that you've crossed over into the enabling lane. It's a lot more based on how it affects you than how it affects them.
Oh, that's such a nice distinction. I have not heard that before, and I really like it. I think that's really important. I believe, we talked about rigorous honesty, beginning with yourself and then with others is the best path to recovery. From your perspective, what are the 5 most essential recovery skills that will lead to a greater possibility of success?
I think accountability probably would be my number one, like more important than all the other things. If you, as a person in recovery, if you will set some accountability in place, which actually can be pretty simple. It's not even so much like, if I make a mistake, this bad thing happens to me. It's more just that I'm telling the people around me that I'm not doing this anymore. Literally just knowing that someone else knows holds you accountable. Like, for example, I was working with a guy this week who had a lapse, and he had been doing really good, but he had went with some friends on a trip, like a guy's trip, and he was telling me about what happened. And I said, well, did anybody, I think there was like 5 of them, did anybody on that trip know that you weren't drinking anymore? And he's like, no. And I said, man, if you would have told even one person, like you didn't even have to tell them all, but just one person, I don't think you would have drank. And he said, I think you're right. And they don't have to do anything.
That's like, right.
Just
they're not your mother. That's right.
Right. Just knowing that they know. So sometimes when you're not telling other people, it's because you're leaving the option on the table. Now, you can say it's not their business and all the things. You don't tell everybody. But when you're not telling anybody that it's because you're leaving room for you to change your mind. So accountability, that's my number one. Of course, there are more, but that's the biggie for me.
Say one more.
I think also having a strong network, of course, and also having good boundaries for yourself as someone in recovery, because in early recovery, you're kind of in the doghouse and you realize it. And you realize that you've made some mistakes. So you might agree to things that you don't want to agree to. Like your person told you have to do this. You have to go to 90 meetings in 9 days. You have to call your sponsor every day. You have to put your shoes on the left or whatever, right? And you agree to all this when you don't really want to, or you don't even intend to. And so when you don't have good boundaries, it's going to set you back up for either passive aggressiveness or becoming sneaky again, or not following through with what you said. So I feel like when you're in early recovery, you don't feel like you have the right to have any boundaries. But if you don't have boundaries, you're going to put yourself in a bad position, which is likely to lead to a bad choice.
Yeah, that's right. What advice would you give to someone who feels like they're the only one in the relationship who sees the problem? And then part two, how do they stop being controlled by their partner's addiction?
Well, Rhoda, it is maddening when you're the only one that sees the problem. And if you're the partner and your spouse is a functional addict or alcoholic, then you probably are the only one that sees the problem, because the fallout happens at home first. Like, the person may still be going to work and functioning really well. Their friends don't see the problem, but you see it first. And so what happens when you're in that situation, it's so frustrating because they deny the problem. No one else sees it. And what a lot of times partners want to do when they're in that situation is they want to go out and they want to recruit other people to see the problem. And that almost always backfires on you. So I really suggest not doing that. And I really, really, really suggest especially don't do that if don't go and recruit their people to be on your side. And by their people, I mean their family, their friends, their brother, their sister, because number one, your partner is going to see that as massive disloyalty, and they may not get over. I mean, that's like the one thing I see people that they don't get over. And it's, if you think about it, if you had a problem, any kind of problem, and it's something that you felt shameful about, and your spouse went around telling your people that you had this problem and asked them to come talk to you about it, think about how that you'd feel humiliated, embarrassed, and angry. And you might, I mean, this is your partner, this is your person, so you're going to be real mad about it, okay? So not only does it backfire on you for that, but even worse, Rhoda, those people won't believe you. And let me tell you why they won't believe you. Because you've been stuck in this dynamic with your partner where you're trying to get them to see a problem and they don't want to see it, and they see you as progressively critical and controlling and negative and over anxious and all the things. And you don't know this, but they've been going behind your back telling their people that you're a crazy controlling maniac. And then when you, especially like to their parents, oh my gosh, the times I see people try to go to their in-laws and try to convince your partner's mother and father, what you don't know is that they've been complaining about you to those people. And when you show up saying that, you're actually validating that. And those people, they're probably not going to say it to your face, but they're thinking, gosh, she was right. He was right. She is crazy. Like, oh my gosh. And then as if you're not in a bad enough position already, now it's just terrible. So now not only are you the only one that sees it, now other people think you're the problem. And it's just maddening.
That's true. And when I think of the two interventions that I stumbled into after the fact, I had nothing to do with interventions. The two people were so angry years later about the intervention and feeling that they had been betrayed.
Yes, I mean, it's like all of a sudden everyone in my life is behind my back talking about me and saying all these things that are embarrassing. People really struggle with that. And I'm not saying never have that kind of intervention. There is a time and place for it. Like, when I say that kind, I mean like the kind they show on TV, the kind I think you're talking about, like a Johnson model intervention. But especially if your person is in denial, don't do that.
So how do they stop being controlled by their partner's addiction?
When they stop trying to force their partner to see it, then what happens is then you can stop spying, and you can stop sending them articles, and you can stop trying to say get help and all this stuff. And you can actually, when you can back up and just let the natural process happen, people figure it out a lot faster than they do when they're trying to power struggle with you about it. And if you decide, hey, I'm going to go on about my life, and they're going to figure it out, or you work with a coach or something and you get a strategic plan on it, then you're not in that emotional roller coaster of it where you're just like reacting to everyday things that are happening. Because when you're just emotionally reacting every day over and over, then you're being controlled by it. So
yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there is something about turning your focus and keeping your energy for yourself and trying to figure out how to make your life work better as opposed to all that radar energy on the
And
other
I know
person.
that's hard. It's like saying, someone's house is burning down and you're saying, don't panic, just sit right there. It is. It does not seem natural, but it will work better.
So, is there anything else about communication that helps people to move from denial to acceptance? And how can another way that couples can improve their communication? We've covered some of it, but are there any other ideas? Because I think this is such a sticky wicket, so to speak.
I teach a lot of communication techniques in our invisible intervention program, which is sort of a intervention that they don't even know happened behind the scenes, but not a sneaky tell people. But one of the ones that I teach in there that I think is really helpful is there's another guy I watch. He calls it an accusation audit, and what it means is you start by saying what your flaws and faults are, or how you've handled the situation incorrectly if you're in the conversation about it. It's like whatever you think they could accuse you of, you say it first. And that's why it's an accusation audit. And this helps for a lot of reasons. If you say, let me give you an example. If you say, I know I tend to overreact about these things, and I could literally just be jumping to all kind of conclusions here because that's like me. But here's this thought I had. I started thinking to myself that this was happening. If you start with that humility kind of place, if they're already thinking it, because if they're already thinking she jumps to conclusions or she overreacts, if you just say that first, they don't have to think it because you already said it and they already know you know it. If you don't say it first, it's all they can think about. They can't think about anything else at that. They won't hear you. The other reason why that works so well is, I've been seeing people with addictions for more than 20 years now. And so that's why I know how they think. And one of the things that I hear them say over and over again is they think that my drinking or my whatever is the only problem. They think they're perfect. They think there's no other problems. And so if you'll just come from a standpoint of acknowledging that, now we're on the same level, and that humility actually usually gets some humility from the other person.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Please share any final words of wisdom that we haven't covered that would benefit my audience.
Sure. If you are out there struggling and your partner has a problem, you're not powerless, despite what other people told you. I've just given you a few tiny little things you can do, and you can see how powerful those are already. I know people are telling you just have to back up, you just have to hope they hit a bottom, you just have to hope they decide they want it for themselves. All that is ridiculous. Stop listening to that. You do have influence. You can't control another person, but you have a massive amount of influence. You just need to know how to play your cards and in what order. And there are things you can do.
Yeah, that's right. And it's more elegant. What you're describing to me is more elegant.
Yeah, these are the things I teach families. These are just the things that I've learned over all these years of working with people in denial that work. Almost everyone that I've ever dealt with, most of them have come to me kicking and screaming, tricked into seeing me, definitely not thinking they had a problem. So I've had to really get some skills on board about how to win people over who didn't want to be talking to me first place, and then get them to start seeing they have a problem. And so I know people say there's nothing you can do until they want it for themselves, but guess what? There's some things you can do to help them want it. And so I just want you to know you're not powerless and that you don't have to just step back and hope they figure it out and cross your fingers. When that's your kid or your partner, that's unacceptable answer, I think.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah.
And remind my audience where they can watch you on YouTube and all about your website, which I was really tickled had a lot of free stuff on it.
Yeah, sure. The best place to find me, the best place to start is actually on YouTube. There's more than 1,000 videos. There's so much free content there. That'll get you really far down the road right there. The channel is called Put the Shovel Down, which I know sounds funny, but it's an old recovery saying, which means you hit your bottom when you put your shovel down, As in, you don't have to keep digging. You don't have to burn every bridge. You don't have to lose everything in your life. That's silly. You can just decide, okay, I'm done, and put your little show down. That was your bottom. So that maybe will help you remember it. I do have a website. It's familyrecoveryacademy.online, and there are a lot of resources there. But I really suggest that you start with the YouTube.
All right. Addictions isolate, but connection heals. Whether it's with a person, a pet, or even nature, nurture something that pulls you toward life instead of numbing it out. Healing is about connection, not correction or coercion. From listening to you, I'm adding that in. And please pass out the episode link to others or follow me at Rhoda on Couples, also on YouTube. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening to What Healthy Couples Know That You Don't. If you have enjoyed the show, please leave a rating and review on iTunes and help get the word out. To learn more or connect with Rhoda, visit therapyideas.net.